This Dimir deck is a zombie tribal build focusing on establishing an overwhelming board state of zombie creatures. These creatures are the engine to the win conditions of this deck. The build is filled with zombie creature spells. There are also various spells and abilities that create zombie creature tokens, as well as grant evasive abilities to our growing number of undead. With this large, evasive, and expandable army, victory generally is achieved through combat, but also can be gained via life drain and or milling our opponents. There are numerous graveyard recursion spells and abilities that will allow us to repeatedly reuse cards from our graveyard, further extending our hand and resources while outvaluing our opponents throughout the game. With a swath of disruption and removal spells in the 99, we will be able to interact with our opponents and their board states in order to ensure victory. Hello and welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic. In today's video, we are going to showcase the channel's Dimir zombie deck. However, before we begin highlighting the contents of the 99, we need to have a little talk about the general of this deck. For the longest time, if we were going to build a Dimir zombie deck, the preferred choice was generally the Scarab God. A 5/5 legendary god for 3 in Dimir, and at the beginning of our upkeep, each opponent loses X life and we scry X, where X is the number of zombies we control. We can pay 2 in Dimir to exile target creature from a graveyard, and we create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. Whenever the Scarab God dies, we return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. It being the commander gives us the choice to return it to our hand or put it back into the command zone. However, there's a new sheriff in town thanks to Innistrad Midnight Hunt, and that is the front-facing commander of the undead zombie deck, which is Wilhelt the Rotcleaver. 2 in Dimir for a 3/3 legendary zombie warrior that whenever another zombie we control dies, if it didn't have Decayed, we create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. Decayed, of course, is it can't block, and whenever the creature attacks, we sacrifice it at the end of combat. And at the beginning of our end step, we may sacrifice a zombie, and if we do, we can draw a card. For the purposes of this deck, I prefer to go with Wilhelt the Rotcleaver as the general, while keeping the Scarab God in the 99, and I'm going to explain the reasons behind that. The Scarab God, with its built-in can-never-die clause of being able to return to our hand as opposed to staying in the graveyard, better serves the overall synergy of this deck if we choose to have Wilhelt as our general. Being able to send Wilhelt to the command zone whenever it's dead or exiled or whenever it changes zones, that presents our opponents with a great deal of concern and problems if we have both the Scarab God being bounced to our hand if it dies, in addition to putting Wilhelt into the command zone if it were to die. If we so chose to just make the Scarab God the commander of this deck, well, then we can always bounce it to our hand and we can always put the Scarab God back into the command zone. However, with Wilhelt, if it gets exiled, it's gone for good. If it gets put into the graveyard, although this is a zombie deck, we have to find the means and the purposes of getting it out of the graveyard and either back into our hand or onto the battlefield. If we make Wilhelt the commander, we always have the fallback option of just putting it into the command zone. I would much rather have our opponents having to consistently worry about Wilhelt getting bounced to the command zone and the Scarab God coming out of the library from the 99 and getting bounced to our hand if it ends up dying. Choosing Wilhelt as the general of this deck provides a great deal of concern and problems and a lot of decision-making processes for our opponents, particularly if we can also get the Scarab God into play at the same time. For the purposes of this Dimir EDH zombie deck, Wilhelt the Rotcleaver is the preferred choice. So let's begin talking about the 99, and the first group of zombies we're going to showcase in this section of the video are going to be zombies that give power and toughness boosts to other zombies, in addition to one guy that, well, will get a power and toughness boost every single time another zombie enters the battlefield under our control. Leading off this group of zombies is Champion of the Perished. For 1 black mana, we get a 1/1 zombie, and whenever another zombie enters the battlefield under our control, we're going to put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of the Perished. Getting things started off very quick and very fast, Champion of the Perished is zombie number 1. Number 2 in this section is the Diregraph Captain. For 1 in Dimir, we have a 2/2 Death Toucher that gives other zombie creatures we control +1/+1. As an additional bonus, we have a built-in pseudo win condition. Whenever another zombie we control dies, target opponent loses 1 life. Pay close attention to that text. It says whenever another zombie and not another non-token zombie. So all those tokens that are going to end up hitting the yard, well, they're going to force one of our opponents to lose a life each time it happens. Zombie number 3 and another Lord is Lord of the Accursed. 2 and a black, other zombies we control get +1/+1. This 2/3 zombie, we can pay 1 and a black and turn him sideways to give all zombies menace until the end of turn. And of course, menace means they can only be blocked by at least 2 or more creatures. All right, creature number 4 in this subset is the Cemetery Reaper. 1 and 2 black, giving other zombie creatures we control +1/+1. This 2/2 zombie allows us to pay 2 and a black, tap him, and exile target creature card from a graveyard. If we do so, we can create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Pay attention to that text because it says exile target creature card from a graveyard and does not necessarily have to be our graveyard. Number 5, we have the Death Baron. 1 and 2 black for a 2/2 zombie wizard. This zombie wizard, the Death Baron, gives skeletons we control and other zombies we control +1/+1 and Death Touch. Although there are no skeleton creatures in this deck, we are going to have lots of zombies getting +1/+1 and Death Touch. All right, the 6th and final member of this first subset of zombies is the Undead War Chief. 2 and 2 black for a 1/1 zombie. It gives zombies we control +2/+1, so Undead War Chief does qualify for that power and toughness boost. So for the purposes of, clarity, 2 and 2 black is going to give us a 3/1 zombie that gives other zombies we control +2/+1, and zombie spells we play cost 1 less to cast. The next group of cards in this deck are cards that are going to create our zombie tokens. So let's start off this subset of cards with the Dreadhorde Invasion. It's an enchantment for 1 and a black that reads at the beginning of our upkeep, we lose 1 life and we amass 1. And of course, to amass 1, we put a +1/+1 counter on an army that we control. If we don't control one, we create a 0/0 black zombie army creature token first and then put that +1/+1 counter on it. And lastly, whenever a zombie token we control with power 6 or greater attacks, it gains lifelink until the end of turn. So although we will be creating a lot of regular 2/2 black zombie creature tokens in addition to some decayed zombie creature tokens, Dreadhorde Invasion gives us a different type of token in order to make our token army look that much more diversified. Dreadhorde Invasion is card number 1. Next up, we have Tainted Adversary. For 1 and a black, we get a 2/3 Death Touching zombie, and when it ETBs, we may pay 2 and a black any number of times. When we pay this cost 1 or more times, we put that many +1/+1 counters on Tainted Adversary, then we create twice that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens with Decayed. So with enough mana in our disposal, we can really create a monstrous Death Touching zombie and a horde of Decayed zombie creature tokens. Number 3, we have not just a zombie token creator, but one of the integral pieces to this deck's potential to go infinite. And that's going to be Poppet Stitcher. 2 and a blue, we have a 2/3 human wizard. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, we create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. At the beginning of our upkeep, if we control 3 or more creature tokens, which will not be inordinately difficult to do in this deck, we may transform Poppet Stitcher. When we transform Poppet Stitcher, it transforms into the Puppet Factory. It turns into an artifact that says, creature tokens we control lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 3/3. At the beginning of our upkeep, we may transform Puppet Factory. So, Puppet Factory will remove all of the decayed abilities from all of our decayed zombie tokens. And why is that important? Because our commander, Wilhelt the Rotcleaver, reads, whenever another zombie we control dies, if it didn't have decayed, we create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with decayed. So the synergy here is Puppet Factory removes the decayed mechanic from all of our zombie creature tokens. We find a sacrifice outlet. We sacrifice a 3/3 abilityless zombie token, of course, or one of our other zombies, but we're going to stick with our zombie tokens because we know they're going to have no abilities because of the Puppet Factory. Once we complete that death trigger, we create another 2/2 black zombie creature with decayed, but the Puppet Factory says, no, we're going to take the decayed ability away from that token and make it a 3/3. We rinse, lather, and repeat, and whatever our sacrifice outlet is, we end up going infinite, creating as many zombie creature tokens that we need to win the game. Wilhelt the Rotcleaver was definitely in very much consideration when Puppet Stitcher and Puppet Factory became a thing, and that's what we're going to do. That's one of the ways in which we're going to win in this deck, and as you see later in this deck tech, there's going to be some sacrifice outlets that will allow us to utilize as win conditions. With Puppet Stitcher being number 3 and presenting such amazing synergy with Wilhelt the Rotcleaver and a potential sacrifice outlet, we move on to entry number 4 of our token creating cards. And here we have Diregraph Colossus, 2 and a black. It's a 2/2 zombie giant, and it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each zombie card in our graveyard. Whenever we cast a zombie spell, create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token. Even without the +1/+1 counters that act as a bonus for Diregraph Colossus, the ability to create a zombie creature token just by casting a zombie spell is going to really create a great deal of value for our board state. And it really will only be a matter of time until we completely overwhelm our opponents. All right, card number 5, we have Wand of Orcus. It is a legendary equipment for 2 and a black. When an equipped creature attacks or blocks, it and zombies we control gain death touch until end of turn. Whenever an equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So we slap Wand of Orcus onto one of our zombie creature tokens, send it off into combat. It has death touch, and if our opponents want to trade down by blocking it, that will be great. We'll take out one of their bigger creatures and lose one of our little black zombie creature tokens. However, if they so choose not to block it and damage gets through, well, we're going to create an oodle and oodles of black zombie creature tokens. Wand of Orcus is card number 5. Entrance number 6, we have Cleaver Scab, 3 and 2 blue for a 2/4 zombie horror. We can pay 3 tap Cleaver Scab, sacrifice another zombie, and create 2 tokens that are copies of the sacrificed creature. So some of our best targets could be what we talked about in our previous vignette with Champion of the Parish leading off a group of zombies that act as lords for the rest of our zombie army. Cleaver Scab is number 6. Next up, we have a very interesting way in which to change the dynamic of our zombie army, and that's going to be Undead Alchemist. It's 3 and a blue for a 4/2. If a zombie we control deals combat damage to a player, instead that player mills that many cards. Whenever a creature card is put into an opponent's graveyard from their library via the milling, in this instance of course, we exile that card and create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. With a big enough army swinging in and having so many creatures that can't be blocked, we can really amass an insurmountable zombie token army just by milling our opponent's libraries and exiling the creatures that hit their yards. All right, card number 8, Undead Alchemist was 7, so we're going to move to 8. It's an enchantment, and it is Endless Ranks of the Dead. 2 and 2 black, at the beginning of our upkeep, create X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, where X is half the number of zombies we control. rounded down. Of course, this won't trigger if we have 0 creatures, or if this won't trigger if we have 0 zombies or 1 zombies, or 1 zombie, but you got to believe we're going to have a lot of zombies under our control. So if we can get Endless Ranks of the Dead onto the battlefield early, well, we're just going to get to the end game that much quicker. All right, next card up, we have Ghoul Caller Gisa. 3 and 2 black for a 3/4 human wizard, so this is not a zombie creature. However, she synergizes with zombies very well, and that synergy is enough of a rationalization to include her in the 99. We can pay a black and tap Gisa, sacrifice another creature, and put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is the sacrifice creature's power. So even if we decide to sacrifice one of our 2/2 zombie creature tokens, we're going to get 2 of those tokens for the price of 1. Ghoul Caller Gisa is in the 99. All right, we have a handful of cards left for this subset, and the next one is Liliana Death's Majesty. Liliana Death's Majesty. The first Planeswalker of this in this EDH deck, and of course it had to be Liliana. For 3 and 2 black, she enters with 5 loyalty counters. We can +1 her to create a 2/2 black zombie creature token, and then we mill 2 cards. We can -3 her to return a target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. And if we're fortunate enough to take off 7 loyalty counters, well, we destroy all non-zombie creatures. Within the 99, we have very, very few non-zombie creatures, so that's definitely something that will benefit us much more than our opponents. All right, next up we have another enchantment, Liliana's Mastery. 3 and 2 black. Zombies we control get +1/+1, and when this ETBs, we create 2 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So for the investment of 5 mana, we get 2 3/3s in addition to an Anthem effect for all of the rest of our zombies. 2 cards remaining in this subset, and the next one is the Newscraft Mob. 4 and 2 black, it's a zombie, it's a 0/0. It ETBs with 5 +1/+1 counters on it, and whenever a player casts a spell, we remove one of those +1/+1 counters, and if we do, we create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So eventually, if this ends up dying because of no +1/+1 counters, and we don't have any Anthem or Lord effects on the battlefield, we would have invested 6 overall mana for 5 2/2 zombie creature tokens. That's 10 power and 10 toughness stretched across 5 bodies, only for the investment of 6 mana. All right, and concluding this subsection of the deck, we have Army of the Damned, the sorcery for 5 and triple black. We create 13 tapped 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. Quick math will indicate that for an investment of 8 mana, we are creating 26 total power, 26 total toughness across 13 zombie bodies. As a bonus, it also has flashback, 7 and triple black, and we create 13 more tapped 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. All in all, if we cast this spell twice, we are investing a total of 18 mana for 26 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, 52 power and 52 toughness for 18 total mana. We'll take that every single day of the week and twice on Friday Night Magic. The next group of cards in the 99 of this deck have to do with the graveyard. They have some graveyard synergies, which, let's be honest, if we're running a zombie deck, we need to have some graveyard shenanigans. Leading off the cards of this subset is Gravecrawler. 1 black mana for a 2/1 zombie that can't block. We may cast Gravecrawler from our graveyard as long as we control a zombie. Gravecrawler could be an integral cog to a lot of infinite combos we're going to have in the 99 of this deck. Gravecrawler is number 1. Next up, we have Relentless Dead. 2 black mana for a 2/2 zombie with menace. When Relentless Dead dies, we may pay a black mana, and if we do, we can return it to our hand. When Relentless Dead dies, we may pay X, and if we do, we can return another target zombie creature with converted mana cost X from our graveyard to the battlefield. Similar to Gravecrawler, Relentless Dead provides a lot of opportunities to do some warped infinite-like things. Creature number 3 is... she's back, Jisa and Geralf. For 2 in Dimir, we have a 4/4, and when they ETB, we mill 4 cards, and during each of our turns, we may cast a zombie creature spell from our graveyard. And another one who's back, we have Liliana, Untouched by Death. This time she's 2 and 2 black, entering with 4 loyalty. We can +1 her to put the top 3 cards of our library into our graveyard. If at least one of them is a zombie card, each opponent loses 2 life and we gain 2 life. So this subtle little drain life effect will help us to build Liliana's loyalty counter so that we can utilize the following 2 throughout the commander game. -2ing Liliana will give target creature -X till end of turn, where X is the number of zombies we control. That will be very helpful when we're dealing with any kind of indestructible threats on the battlefield. Lastly, and the main reason she's included in this deck, we can take off 3 loyalty counters from Liliana, which we can do the big bang as soon as she ETBs the battlefield, which for a lot of planeswalkers generally is not the case. Here, we can take off 3 loyalty counters, and we can cast zombie cards from our graveyard this turn. Not just 1, we can cast as many as we have mana for. Liliana Untouched by Death is Planeswalker number 2 in the 99, and card number 4 for this subset of cards. Number 5, we have Ghoul's Night Out. 3 and 2 black. For each player, we choose a creature card in that player's graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under our control. They're black zombies in addition to their other colors, and they gain Decayed. So this is a good way in which to, pluck fresh from their graves some desirable creatures that have been put there throughout the game. Well, they come into play under our control, and as long as we don't attack with them, they'll stay on our battlefield. But if we do so choose to send them into combat, they will be sacrificed at the end of combat because of the Decayed mechanic. Number 6, we have Patriarch's Bidding. 3 and 2 black sorcery. Come on, camera. Come on. There we go. Each player chooses a creature type. Then each player returns all creature cards of a type chosen this way from their graveyard to the battlefield. Proceed with caution when considering casting this spell. If you're sitting at a table with a plethora of other tribal decks, make sure that your graveyard stacks up more favorably than your opponent's. Next, we have Mikaeus the Unhallowed, 3 and triple black. It's a 5/5 zombie cleric with Intimidate. Whenever a human deals damage to us, destroy it on the spot. Other non-human creatures we control get +1/+1 and have Undying. So this is going to act as another lord for our zombies, and as long as those zombies are non-token creatures, when they hit the yard, they're coming back to the battlefield under our control with a +1/+1 counter on them. And the last card for this subset is the Zombie Apocalypse. 3 and triple black for the exact mana value of Mikaeus. This sorcery reads, return all zombie creature cards from our graveyard to the battlefield, tapped, then destroy all humans. Zombie Apocalypse is kind of almost like a personalized Patriarch's Bidding for 1 more black mana. All right, this next group of cards are some of our alternate win conditions. The first one being an enchantment called Cover of Darkness. 1 and a black. When it ETBs, we choose a creature type. Of course, we choose zombies. And this will be creatures of the chosen type have fear, which means they can only be blocked by black or artifact creatures. Cover of Darkness is alternate win condition number 1. Next up, we have Plague Belcher. A 5/4 zombie beast with menace for only 2 and a black mana. When it ETBs, we put 2 -1/-1 counters on target creature we control. Notice the text. This does not say on another target creature you control. So we can choose Plague Belcher for those -1/-1 counters if needed. Whenever another zombie we control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. So much to like about this little wall of text, particularly when it says whenever another zombie and not another non-token zombie. So all those tokens that we were talking about earlier in this video, they are going to trigger Plague Belcher each time they hit the yard. Another wonderful part about this last wall of text, it says each opponent loses 1 life. It doesn't say target opponents. So again, we get to hit every single opponent at the table, and this will help us to dance around Hexproof and Shroud if any of those players have it. All right, win condition number 3, we have Lich Lord of Unks. For 1 and a Dimir, we have a 2/2 zombie wizard. We can pay a Dimir, tap it, and create a 1/1 blue and black zombie wizard creature token. We can also pay 2 blue and 2 black. Notice that we do not have to tap Lich Lord of Unks for the second ability. So we can activate this multiple times in a turn. Pay 2 blue, pay 2 black, target player loses X life and puts the top X cards of their library into their graveyard, where X is the number of zombies we control. With multiple activations of Lich Lord of Unks during one of our turns, this can turn into a serious threat to one of our opponents. Alternate win condition number 4, we have Vengeful Dead, a 3/2 zombie for 3 and a black. Whenever Vengeful Dead or another zombie is put into a graveyard from play, each opponent loses 1 life. Again, very similar to Plague Belcher. It's whenever another zombie dies, each opponent is going to lose 1 life. We've already spoken a lot about the Scarab God is not going to be the general of this deck, but it is going to fall into the category of alternate win conditions. And lastly, we have the Grey Merchant of Asphodel. 3 and 2 black as a 2/4. When it ETBs, each opponent loses X life, where X is X is our devotion to black. We gain life equal to the life lost this way. All right, with this group of cards, we're going to talk about some removal. We're going to talk about some disruption. We're going to talk about ways in which we can interact with our opponents and their board states. The first one is Feed the Swarm, a sorcery for 1 and a black, destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. We lose life equal to that permanent's converted mana cost. Dimir does not really provide many options for enchantment removal, so including Feed the Swarm is one way in which to get a problematic or troublesome enchantment into the graveyard. Next up, we have Reality Shift. At instant speed, we pay 1 and a blue and exile target creature. Its controller manifests the top card of their library. For anyone who's unfamiliar or just doesn't remember what manifest is, that player puts the top card of their library onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature. If it's a creature card, it can be turned face up anytime for its mana cost. All right, next up we have Fleshbag Marauder. 2 and a black as a zombie, 3/1. When it ETBs, each player sacrifices a creature. Generally, we're going to be sacrificing the Fleshbag Marauder each time, getting it into the graveyard, and then hopefully finding some ways to recur it back to the battlefield or into our hand to make more of our opponents sacrifice their creatures. All right, card number 4, we have the Murderous Rider. Now we have the benefit of casting this as removal or as a zombie knight. So first we'll talk about the removal spell. It's called Swift End. 1 and 2 black, we destroy target creature or planeswalker, and we lose 2 life. Losing 2 life, that's not that big of a deal when we're starting with 40. And then if we cast this card for Swift End, we then exile the card, and we may cast the creature later from exile. And when we do, we cast a 2/3 lifelinker that when it dies, we put it on the bottom of our library. Next up, we have Attrition, an enchantment for 1 and 2 black that lets us pay a black mana, sacrifice a creature to destroy target non-black creature. The non-black creature could be a little restrictive. It's not like black is an unpopular color at the EDH table. However, we still have artifact creatures on the other 4 colors, so hitting 5 out of 6, that's not too bad. particularly when we are going to have a number of very expendable creature tokens throughout any game that we play with this deck. Next removal spell, we have Vraska's Contempt, 2/2 black at instant speed. Exile target creature or planeswalker, and this time we gain 2 life. So we're not going to lose 2 life like we would with Murderous Rider and Swift End. Vraska's Contempt will put those 2 life back onto our life total. All right, going back to enchantments, we have Call to the Grave, 4 and a black. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-zombie creature. So we do have to be cautious when putting this spell onto the battlefield, because although this is a dedicated zombie deck, there are some instances in which we could have a creature on the battlefield that is not a zombie. Ghoul-Caller Gisa is one, the Scarab God, so we just need to be careful and time casting Call to the Grave where it's much more favorable for us than it will be our opponents. All right, staying on theme with an enchantment that costs 5, we have Dictate of Erebus, 3 and 2 black. We can flash this in at any time for its mana cost, of course. And whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So with the sacrifice outlet and so many expendable zombies at our disposal, we can really control the board and make sure that we keep the avenues to combat nice and clear for our zombie army to just take advantage of without any of our opponents having creatures to block them. All right, staying with the mana value of 5, but transitioning from enchantment to creature, we have Noxious Ghoul, 3/3 zombie. Whenever it or another zombie comes into play, all non-zombie creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. So very similar to what we were talking about with Call to the Grave. Be cautious when casting this and having a bunch of zombies following it if you're really using the Scarab God as a way in which to win the game. Another nice part about Noxious Ghoul that we should really pay specific attention to, it does say whenever another zombie comes into play, it does not specify non-token, which always is going to be a benefit when we're throwing around so many different spells and effects that create zombie creature tokens. Next up, we have Necrotic Hex, 6 and a black at sorcery speed. Each player sacrifices 6 creatures, and then we create 6 tapped 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. With the number of creature tokens we're going to have on the battlefield, this spell is not going to hurt us one bit, because those, like we've said so many times already, just in this subset of cards, we have a lot of expendable bodies on the battlefield. Our opponents, 6 creatures that they're going to sacrifice for just an investment of 7 mana. I'm not so sure that those creatures are going to be as expendable as ours. Again, keeping in mind, this is each player's sacrifices, so this gets around Shroud, this gets around Hexproof, this gets around Indestructible, this gets around Protection. Necrotic Hex is going to be a very sneaky good card in this Dimir zombie deck. All right, we're left with 2 cards left for our Disruption and Removal category. And there are a couple of big ones, folks. The first one is Kindred Dominance, 5 and 2 black at sorcery speed. We choose a creature type, which, let's be honest, it's going to be zombies. Then we destroy all creatures that aren't the chosen type. So we're going to clear the board of all creatures except for zombies. Kindred Discovery is going to be one of our bomb removal spells in this deck. Bomb removal spell number 2, and actually could be categorized as one of our alternate win conditions, we have the Meat Hook Massacre. It's an enchantment that reads, when this enters the battlefield, each creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. And of course, at the top right-hand corner, we pay X and 2 black to cast the spell. Whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. That's just a wonderful set of words in the middle of this card. Whenever a creature we control dies, it does not say non-token. So any one of our zombies that hit the yard, any one of our creatures that hit the yard is going to trigger each of our opponents to lose 1 life. And again, it doesn't say target opponent, it says each opponent. And the last wall of text on this legendary enchantment reads, whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, we're going to gain 1 life. So this is going to help us gain some incidental life each and every time we destroy one of our opponent's creatures. And with this group of cards, we are going to roll out with some cards that give and provide card advantage in addition to some tutoring effects, particularly if we're looking to assemble the pieces to our infinite engine, or if we need some answers that are dictated by gameplay or board state. And the first such card we're going to talk about is Crypt Breaker. It's a 1/1 zombie for a black mana. We can pay 1 and a black, tap Crypt Breaker, discard a card to create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. That's not the ability that we're talking about right here. The one that we're focusing on is the wall of text underneath that reads, tap 3 untapped zombies we control, we draw a card, and we lose 1 life. With a deck that's going to have such a large number of creatures on the battlefield, being able to tap 3 of them and pay 1 life to draw a card, well, that's going to present so many different advantages for us that it really should be only a matter of time until we overwhelm our opponents with our cards, with our battlefield, and just the game in general. All right, next up, card number 2 we're going to talk about is Vampiric Tutor. 1 black mana at instant speed. We search our card for our library, shuffle our library, put that card on top, and lose 2 life. One of the best tutors in the format. Vampiric Tutor is card number 2. Next up, we have Diabolic Intent. This is, for all intents and purposes, a demonic tutor with an extra mana cost. Not mana cost, with an additional cost to play. We tap 1 and a black, and we sacrifice a creature as an additional cost to play Diabolic Intent. Then we search our library for a card and put that card into our hand. So Diabolic Intent it really is Demonic Tutor. We just have to make sure that we can sacrifice another creature in order to cast the spell. And again, as we've driven the point home so many times within this deck tech video, we're going to have a lot of expendable creatures. All right, next up, card number 4, as we hit the halfway point of our card advantage and tutor effect subset of the video. We have a sorcery. It is Distant Melody, 3 and 2 blue. We cast this, we choose zombies, we draw a card for each permanent we control of that type. And please keep in mind, zombie tokens are permanents. All right, next up, we have Hordewing Scab. 4 and a blue for a 3/3 flying zombie horror that gives other zombies we control flying as well. Imagine a lord that comes down and give all of our zombie creatures flying. Not just tokens, all of our zombies get flying. For the purposes of this subset of cards, whenever 1 or more zombies we control deal combat damage to 1 or more of our opponents, we may draw cards equal to the number of opponents that were dealt damage this way. And if we do, we discard that many cards. With such a large army, we're going to be able to go wide throughout the entire game. We're going to be able to trigger Hordewing Scab's ability many, many times. So if we're sitting down for a traditional game of Commander and we send our horde into battle, and we damage 3 of our opponents, we're drawing 3 cards, and then we're discarding 3 cards. Hordewing Scab provides a lot of versatility for what we're looking to do in this deck. Next up, staying with a mana value of 5, just changing it around a little bit, we have Eloise, Nephalia Sleuth. For 3 in Dimir, we have a 4/4 human rogue. So let's just point out that this is not a zombie. This is one that's going to help synergize with what we're doing in this zombie deck. Whenever another creature we control dies, we investigate. Right there, we already are in love with Eloise. Whenever another creature, it doesn't specify non-token, it doesn't specify creature type. So for the purposes of this deck, whenever any one of our creatures hits the yard, we're going to create a clue token. And of course, a clue token is we can pay 2, sacrifice it to draw a card. Whenever we sacrifice a token, we get to surveil 1. So if we have Eloise in play and we're sacrificing our clue tokens, we're also going to be able to surveil 1, which we can look at the top card of our library, and we may put that card into our graveyard. It's like a different type of a mechanic than Scry. Scry would allow us to put it on the bottom, leave it on the top. Surveil lets us leave it on the top, or put it into the graveyard. However, whenever we sacrifice a token, which, let's face it, we're going to have a lot of zombie creature tokens, we get to surveil 1 each and every time. Eloise, Nephalia Sleuth is going to be just an engine of value in this deck. And our last entrant into this subset, we have Corpse Harvester. 3 and 2 black for a 3/3 zombie wizard. We can tap 1 and a black. We can tap Corpse Harvester, sacrifice a creature, and search our library for a zombie card. and a swamp card, reveal them, and put them into our hand. So let's review real quickly what this dude is going to do for our deck. We pay 1 and a black, we tap this, we sacrifice one of the many expendable creatures on a battlefield under our control. Then we search our library for a swamp card and a zombie card, and we put them into our hand. So we're sacrificing, let's say we're sacrificing a zombie token, and we're paying 1 and a black to search for a land and a zombie card. That is amazing value. The 1 and a black and the sacrificing of a creature, well, that's Diabolic Intent, a card that we've already reviewed in this deck tech video. Again, with Corpse Harvester, we can't get any card that we need, but still, we're ramping with a land to our hand, and we're getting a zombie card, most likely one of our zombie creature spells, to replace the spot that the sacrificed creature had. Corpse Harvester is going to be a very sneaky way in which to ramp right past our opponents and end up winning the game. The following group of cards are our miscellaneous spells. They're going to help strengthen the overall synergy of this deck as a way in which to just make it that more focused. And the first card we're going to talk about, actually the first few cards we're going to talk about, are some of the sacrifice outlets that we were hinting at earlier during the video. The first one is Carrion Feeder. 1/1 zombie for a black mana. It can't block, but that's okay. We can sacrifice a creature to put a +1/+1 counter on Carrion Feeder. Any creature can get sacrificed, and that's going to help us do exactly what we want to do when we take advantage of our infinite combos. Carrion Feeder is sacrifice outlet number 1. Sacrifice outlet number 2, Altar of Dementia. Artifact for 2 colorless mana. We can sacrifice a creature, and target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of their library into their graveyard. This could have been included in the category of alternate win conditions as well, particularly if we're sitting down to a table full of opponents that do not have any automatic library shuffling creatures in their deck, like the Eldrazi Titans. So Altar of Dementia, although it is a sacrifice outlet, it could also be looked at as a potential win condition. And our last sacrifice outlet here is Phyrexian Altar. 3 colorless mana, we can sacrifice a creature and add 1 mana of any color. So if we flash back for a moment to Gravecrawler, which is a 2/1 zombie for 1 black mana that we can cast from the graveyard as long as we have another zombie in play, imagine the number of death triggers that could pile up by sacrificing Gravecrawler, who's right over here, to the Phyrexian Altar, getting a black mana, using it to cast it back from the graveyard, paired with any of the life drain effects that we've already seen in this video. Well, that's good game if no opponent can interact with that combo. All right, now stepping away from the sacrifice outlets to a couple of other different types of spells, we're going to include a copy of Leyline of Anticipation. 2 and 2 blue, this enchantment reads, we may cast spells as though they had flash. And if Leyline of Anticipation is in our opening hand, we may begin the game with it on the battlefield. So we're playing blue, so there's no necessity to include the Dalkin Orrery. I mean, the chances of this being in our opening hand are slow. I mean, they're low. It's not something that we're going to have happen very often. However, the fact that we're playing with blue allows us to play with the enchantment versus the artifact. Enchantment removal is a little less desirable by opponents than artifact removal. So including Leyline of Anticipation over the Dalkin Orrery is preferred, particularly because we have blue in the deck. Next spell, another enchantment. This is Rooftop Storm. 5 and a blue. We may pay nothing, 0, zilch, squadouche, rather than pay the mana cost for zombie creature spells we cast. So imagine a world where we have Leyline of Anticipation and Rooftop Storm on the battlefield under our control in the same game. All right, and our last miscellaneous spell for this category is Empty the Laboratory. X and 2 blue at sorcery speed. We sacrifice X zombies. Let's stop right there and analyze that for a moment. Sacrifice X zombies. It doesn't say non-token zombies. So again, we keep driving the point home of those expendable zombie creature tokens. Well, this is a great spell to use them. Sacrifice X zombies, then reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal a number of zombie creature cards equal to the number of zombies sacrificed this way. Put those cards onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. We don't even lose the cards to have them go to the graveyard. We keep the cards that are not zombie creature cards in our deck. I don't know why you would not play with Empty the Laboratory. Sacrifice 10 zombie creature tokens, find 10 zombie creature cards from the top of our library, put them into play. Can you imagine end of turning this on our last opponent's? Can you imagine our last opponent's end step? We cast Empty the Laboratory with the Ley Line of Anticipation in play. Oh baby, that's game over, lights out. That's all she wrote. And lastly, we have our mana base. We're going to start with our mana rocks and then transition to the lands that we've included in the 99 of this deck. Our first artifact is Mana Crypt. It costs us nothing but some damage. Artifact number 2, the best one in our format, we're talking Soul Ring. 1 mana to invest into it to give us 2 mana back whenever we turn it sideways. Mana rock number 3, we have Arcane Signet. For the purposes of this deck, we're going to invest 2 colorless mana into it, and we're going to tap it for a blue or a black mana. Similar to Talisman of Dominance, we'll pay 2 colorless mana. We can tap this for a colorless mana, or we can tap this for a blue or a black and take 1 point of damage. Next up, we have not a mana rock, but something that's going to provide us some mana ramp. It is Sword of the Animist. It's an investment of 2 colorless mana for a legendary equipment with also an equip cost of 2. Whenever an equipped creature attacks, we may search our library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Why this is going to be such a valuable inclusion in this type of deck is that this is going to be our form of a rampant growth. After we get over the initial investment of 2 colorless mana, each time we equip this to one of our many expendable zombie creature tokens in this deck, which, as a side note, is the exact same mana value of a rampant growth, we're going to be able to search our library for a basic land and put that into play tapped every time we send one of those guys into combat. And lastly, for our mana rocks, we have Crowded Crypt. 2 and a black for an artifact that comes in that lets us tap for a black mana. Whenever a creature we control dies, there's those words again that we love so many times. Whenever a creature, it doesn't specify non-token, it doesn't specify zombie, just whenever a creature we control dies, we put a corpse counter on Crowded Crypt. Then, at any time during the game, we can pay 4 and 2 black, tap Crowded Crypt, and sacrifice it to create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed for each corpse counter on Crowded Crypt. So we can wait until our last opponent's end of turn and hopefully create just a boatload of zombie creature tokens in order to swing in and win the game. All right, now let's talk about the lands we've included in this deck. They were selected with a distinct purpose in mind, one of which we'll talk about as we conclude the video. So, for the purposes of beginning, we have 4 basic islands to lead things off, and that's going to be followed by 4 basic swamps. So 4 basic islands and 4 basic swamps, continued by 4 basic snow-covered islands. And if you are a fan of the channel, you know how we feel about symmetry. So if we have 4 snow-covered islands, we're going to have 4 snow-covered swamps. So the mana base thus far is going to be built around 16 basic lands, total having 4 different names. And if you know where we're going with this, you can already forecast what one of the non-basic lands are that's going to be included in this deck. All right, so with our 4 basic islands and our 4 basic snow-covered islands, our 4 basic swamps and our 4 basic snow-covered swamps, That's 16 total lands. Now let's get to the non-basic lands. We have Phyrexian Tower. It's going to tap for a colorless, or we can tap and sacrifice a creature to add 2 black mana. We have Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth. Each land is a swamp in addition to its other land types. Yes, this has the potential to help fix our opponent's colors, but we are going to benefit from this inclusion much more than they will. And just as a side note, please understand that Urborg itself will allow itself to tap for a black mana. If we have Urborg, of course we're going to play with Cabal Coffers. Tap 2, tap Cabal Coffers, and we're going to add a black mana to our mana pool for each swamp we control. All right, now we're going to talk about a ton of these lands that are going to give us a black or a blue whenever we turn it sideways. We have, of course, the best land in the format. We have a Command Tower. That's definitely card number 1. Path to Ancestry. It does ETB tapped, which generally is a deterrent for me to want to include any lands into a deck that come into play tapped. However, the benefits outweigh that potential risk. Whenever we tap to add 1 mana of any color of our commander's color identity, if that mana was spent to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we're going to scry 1. So including Wilhelt the Rotcleaver as our commander is going to help pay off Path of Ancestry. If it were the Scarab God, we would not gain that benefit. Next up, we have a Morphic Pool. It's our Dimir fan land. As long as we have 2 or more opponents, that bad boy is coming into play untapped. Of course, we have our Dimir Shockland, Watery Grave. If it comes into play, we want it right away, where it's going to cost us 2 life. Drowned Catacombs gives us a blue and a black, and will come into play untapped as long as we control an island or a swamp. Sunken Hollow is going to give us a blue or a black, and it will come into play untapped as long as we control 2 or more basic lands. Tainted Isle will come down. We can tap it for a colorless, tap it for a blue or a black. The last ability we can only activate if we control a swamp. Sunken Ruins is our Dimir filter land. Taps for a colorless, or we can pay a blue or a black, tap Sunken Ruins to add any combination of 2 Dimir mana. Underground River is our Dimir Pain land. Tap for a colorless, or tap for a blue or a black, and it deals 1 point of damage to us. Choked Estuary is our Dimir Show land. It enters the battlefield untapped if we reveal an island or a swamp card from our hand. Darkwater Catacombs, we can pay 1 mana. We can pay 1 colorless mana, turn this sideways to get a blue and a black. Clearwater Pathway is our Dimir pathway. On the back side, if we so choose for it to come into play, we can choose Murkwater Pathway. So it can give us a blue or a black. It can't give us both. Unclaimed Territory is going to come into play. We're going to choose Zombies. We can tap this for a colorless mana, or we can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. For the purposes of this deck, it will be blue or black, but we can only spend that to cast a creature spell of the chosen type, which of course will be a zombie. All right, and the last 3 lands are lands that are not going to provide us with any colored mana, but it's definitely going to help synergize with what this deck wants to do. Next, we have High Market. Tap for a colorless, tap to sacrifice a creature, and when we do, we gain 1 life. This is a way in which to prevent any of our opponents from exiling any of our important zombie creatures. We get them into the graveyard instead. All right, and card number 98 in the 99 is Unholy Grotto. Taps for a colorless, but we can pay a black mana, tap Unholy Grotto, and we can put a target zombie card from our graveyard on top of our library. That's a way in which to skip the recursion of getting it from the graveyard to the battlefield, just for the investment of a black mana and tapping Unholy Grotto. And lastly, card number 99 in the 99, bringing everything together, is Field of the Dead. This comes into play tapped. We tap it for a colorless mana. However, the payoff is the wall of text under its mana ability. Whenever Field of the Dead or another land enters the battlefield under our control, if we control 7 or more lands with different names, we create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. There are a total of 23 different lands in this deck with different names. We strip away the 16 basics that we have with our basic islands, our basic swamps, our basic snow-covered islands, and our basic snow-covered swamps. Those 16 form 4 different named lands, and then we have 19 other non-basic lands. So we should be able to trigger Field of the Dead early and often, as long as we're playing lands every single turn. And that is all for this deck tech. This is MTG Burgeoning's Dimir Zombie EDH deck. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.